Yo, 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 yo. What's good? What's good? What's good? Hello, hello, hello. I'm Jay Hall, representing Starting With Today. Welcome. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. Today is going to be a really, really good live. Like, I've been looking forward to this live for like a while now. Shout out to the director, Charlene Anderson, the founder, Starting With Today. You know, her. Shout out to the cause. Us coming together, really, really bringing this topic. That's something that I really think is very valuable and important to our community and is healthy also too. I'm Jay Hall, and today we're going to talk about vulnerability in Black men. Okay, so we're going to talk about vulnerability in Black men. We're going to be joined by a licensed therapist, my guy Tariq Amari Walton, and I'm going to get him in. He got to ask for the request real quick. I see Tariq in there. Make sure we get him in. All right, I see. I'm a little rusty when it comes to the IG Live. Tariq, you got to ask for the request. But yeah, today we're talking about vulnerability in Black men. The origin story of this is started from an article that I wrote for AURN, which is American Urban Radio Networks. An article is called Who Can I Run To? The Search for Black Male Vulnerability. And the reason why I wrote the article, because I'll be honest with you, is coming from a personal place. Oh, Tariq, we're going to get into our tweaks here. You should be there soon. Tariq, I just hit you. There you go. What's up, brother?
Yeah. What's happening, Jay
You on
Hall?
time. There we go. They said we can't be on time, but we here.
Hey, man, I was trying to be on time, man, but I'm still trying to figure out how to use this thing myself, man.
Yo, I was. I haven't used the live in a second, so I was like, wait, it's still the same, right? It's still the same.
Look it. I'm always depending on Charlene to do it right. I'm like, hey, I'll just sit back and, it's for her to get it. So,
How you
I'm
doing
glad to
today?
be here. Man, fantastic, man. Glad to be here with you.
That's good. Well, I was telling everybody, and I'll say it again, it's not an issue. Today, we're going to talk about vulnerability in Black men. And
Yep.
the origin of this IG Live came from an article I wrote called Who Can I Run To? The Search for Black Male Vulnerability for AURN, American Urban Radio Networks. And I was just about to get into, right before you came in, I was saying the reason why I even wrote that article to begin with, because honestly, I was on the sabbatical where I just kind of had to take a time out because like many people, 2020 was kicking my tail.
Yeah, man.
And
Yeah. A lot of that going around.
yeah, I had to take what I like to call like a trap sabbatical. You know what I'm saying? I needed that time
Right.
because I'm not there yet to take the official whole year, but I took my own trap sabbatical. And all I was doing, I stripped myself away from a lot of social media, and all I had time and space for was just writing. And the
Good.
question came to me that when it comes to vulnerability as a Black male, like what does that look like? Now, first of all, Tariq, let me just tell everybody who you are in case they don't know, and we got some new people here. You, Tariq Amari Walton, are a licensed therapist, correct?
Yep. Licensed marriage and family therapist. Yep.
Okay. And you primarily work with couples, or how does that go?
Mostly with couples. I have individuals I work with as well. A lot of Black men. I work with a lot of Black men too, but primarily I work with couples. That's my main thing.
Yeah, I saw the live with you and Charlene, I think like a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to join in, but my phone was messing up because when you were talking about a lot of Black males end up coming to you because they were in couples therapy first.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, that's
Yeah.
how I got into therapy. I mean, I'm no longer with the individual, but I'm still in therapy because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the introduction. I mean, a lot of us have a hard time making our way to therapy on our own, but when we're finally forced to consider it with our mates, we get in there and we realize it's a lot different than we expected. And so all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you know what? I have a few things I need to work on. Let me sit down with somebody on my own, officially. And so it's crazy because you would think that, with everything that's going on, that we'd be the first ones to jump out there.
Mm-hmm.
But nah, man. I mean, nah. And this is why we have to talk about vulnerability. A lot of us don't know how to open up or are not willing to open up at first until you sit down with somebody you're comfortable and now you feel safe enough to start talking about it. But we'll get into all that.
Oh, no. It leads into what I was going to open up with in your sessions from your side. And you can go first and I'll reply after you. And I post this when I had wrote the article. What does Black male vulnerability look like to you in America? For you and your
Man.
time?
Well, now you've heard me talk about this in our barbershop talking to people before. And the way I always start off is there's never been a time in American history where a Black man felt comfortable being vulnerable. Never. We can go back to when they first started trying to pull us off the continent, through the Middle Passage, on through enslavement, onto post Civil War and segregation, all the way up until now. there's never been a time where we could be vulnerable because there always has been a consequence for being vulnerable. If we cried out, we were beaten. If we tried to express anything, we were always hurt by it. And so even in more contemporary days, at home, if you express some kind of vulnerability, it was suck it up. If you tried to express a vulnerability at school, then, your teachers were lashing out at you. You couldn't do it out on the block because now people can take advantage of you. You were taught to keep everything in, to maintain your own, feelings of vulnerability, any kind of emotion other than anger and joy. Keep that inside because someone's going to be out there to try and take advantage of it. And so there's never been a time for us to really feel comfortable. And now we're just getting the luxury of being able to express ourselves. But even then, there's a lot of danger that's incorporated with it. So a lot of people are very afraid. There's a lot of fear around opening up because they don't know what to do with it. They don't know where it's going to go. They don't know how to process it. They've never experienced it before. And so a lot of people just keep it all bottled up.
Yeah, I got to say that's true because when I talked about in past conversations, like you said, at the barber, at the shop, the shape up and things of that nature, what Black male vulnerability looks like in America, to me, is almost non-existent. Because when I hear about the word vulnerable, when I was a kid, it meant something totally different than the definition of what it means for me now. When I was a kid, vulnerability simply meant weakness. Plain and simple.
Soft.
Know, when you were, if you started playing sports, your coach would say something like, "We're vulnerable right here." You know what I mean? But he'll say it with such authority that you would just kind of just be like, all right, it was an interpretation of weakness. And you didn't necessarily have to be of the streets or in the streets, just in our neighborhoods, how it was designed, because vulnerability would get you hurt in some shape or form or fashion. If you were vulnerable when you got pulled over by the cops, meaning like if you wasn't paying attention, if you had to be whatever, you would die. If you were coming from a neighborhood that was the streets, you will die. Because you could not be vulnerable because someone would catch you slipping and either steal from you, kill you, something. It would be some form of hurt. So you had all this conditioning that was brought to you about that, to your point, being passed on through years and hundreds of years of slavery.
Generations of it,
And it came from people who loved you because they just wanted you to get home. So you took it from someone you love and you valued it.
Right. I mean, it was a form of protection in their eyes. I'm teaching you that by being vulnerable, it is looked at as weakness. And so by teaching you not to allow yourself to be expressive, then you will be safe. You'll be safer out here when I'm not around to protect you. That's your parents. And so keep it inside. If anything, and that's one of the things when you talk about male vulnerability, a lot of times you hear, our companions, our women say, well, you're not very emotional. Well, trust me, he's emotional. You see that anger. And when you talk about male vulnerability, oftentimes the only emotion that's often expressed by men is some sort of anger. And the reason why we often do that is to create that barrier between us and others so they can't harm us. If we say that, I'm disappointed, well, that's one way of expressing vulnerability and letting people know how you're feeling. But you're not going to say that because you don't know how someone could react to that. They can think, okay, well, they're disappointed. Well, I can continue to disappoint them. I can take advantage of that. Well, if you just show anger instead, well, no one really knows what's going on with you, but they know not to mess with you. It keeps that boundary between you and other people. But you know what? That doesn't work in relationships. That's not going to work for any kind of healthy relationship you want to maintain. Whether with a mate, your children, your friends, you have to allow yourself to open up. And we can get more into that too. When you think about what vulnerability means now, how would you define vulnerability?
Right now, it means me allowing myself, letting my guard down, and allowing my true feelings, my true honesty to be heard, to be said, to be shown. That's what it means for me. And for you to still, and if I'm going to just be frank, talking about like in a relationship, for you to still look at me the same way. You know what I'm saying? Like when I lay myself down to you, whether I'm showing you something that I'm very sensitive to or showing you something that really makes me happy, can you still look at me the same? And part of the thing that I still have conversations with people about is that vulnerability, we got to get out of our head that it looks like one particular thing. Vulnerability is not this, you standing in the rain and holding the radio up. It doesn't have to look like that, right? Vulnerability can be me simply saying, man, when I was a kid, me and my mother used to dance to this song. You know, when I used to really like ice cream from this particular area. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when I was in Brooklyn, I used to really like to go to this place in Carroll Gardens and get this apple croissant because
Mm-hmm.
I was broke and I was a kid living in New York trying to make it. That's
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to
Yeah.
be this, oh, such and such got shot, or you know, my aunt died of cancer. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to be that. And I think what happens is because people can't identify, they dismiss it.
Right.
You know, they dismiss
Yeah.
it. What do you see when you're in your sessions of that? Do you think that black men, through your experience, have they had struggles of trusting you and being vulnerable in that place?
Nah, yo, let me tell you, it's so funny because in a lot of first sessions with black men individually, yo, they break down. They break down
I
because
did.
because you know what? And I teach a course to other clinicians around working with black men therapeutically. And one thing I tell them is to ask questions. One thing about us as black men, and one of the reasons why we don't really open up is because people don't ask us questions. It's always directives. Do this. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You start asking a brother some questions, some personal questions, and you get him to start reflecting on his past and what he's gone through as a child, the experiences as a kid. Dude, the tears start flowing because they have literally decades of frustration built up, and finally someone's opened the door for them to let it out, and it comes out. It comes screaming out. And so no, I think with me they find somebody that they have something in common with, besides for just a black face, someone with a maybe common experiences. And so the trust, I don't want to say it's instant, but it's more than they've trusted before. They recognize when they sit down with me, whether online or in my office, that's a safe space. And so now here is the opportunity to let out all the stuff that's been built up that I haven't even thought about in decades. But now you've opened that door and here it comes flooding out. And that's one of the reasons why they've been so afraid to be vulnerable, because once they let it out, they don't know what to do with it. And so if you're with a mate who you open up to and you let all this stuff out, and your mate's looking at you like, what's all this about? Because they're not used to it. You don't know where to go from there. At least here with me, you have someone who's going to treat you with compassion, who's going to validate your experiences and validate your feelings. And you have the chance to just be you without feeling like you have to hide anything. So, yeah, man, they open up real fast.
I just want to remind everyone that's checking in with us, and we highly appreciate it. We will be taking questions. So please get your questions ahead of time. Ask questions right now, because we will have a time for questions in just in a minute. So get your questions ready for everything that you have. We'll be getting to that. In my article, when I wrote, you remember a couple years ago when the conversation of the great Nikki Giovanni and the late great James Baldwin had went viral.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Right. Yeah.
conversation was Nikki Giovanni saying, lie to me, right? And she had said, quote, why are you going to be truthful to me when you lie to everybody else? You lied when you smiled at that crackhead job. Lie to me, smile, treat me the same way you would treat him. And then Baldwin said, reply to that, I can't give a performance all day on the job, then come home and give a performance all night in the house.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that?
Recognize that, one thing you have to find environments where you shouldn't have to hold so much in or wear that mask all the time. You want to be able to feel free at work a little bit more, so that you're not out there lying all the time, where you're not carrying the weight of the lie all the time. Because now when you do get home, yeah, you're trying to let it all out. And the way you let it out is not productive for your relationship. And so now you're coming home and you're crashing. I'm not saying lie when you get home, but you need to find more freedom and more sense of peace in what you're doing, so that you're not carrying so much weight with you all the time. And so now when you get home, you want to figure out a way to, express yourself in a way that can be validated. I think one of the problems we have once we get home is that we just straight break down. And I don't even want to say break down. And let me say this, a lot of men will say they don't want to open up because they don't want to seem like they're complaining. But what they're doing is they're venting their anger and their frustration when they get home. And I get what Nikki's trying to say, but what you want to do is encourage them to feel a little bit more peace in their everyday life. So they're not coming home and letting you have all the negativity, you know?
Now, I will say, just for, because those two are the greats, I encourage everybody to go watch that full conversation in its full context to understand exactly what she was saying in more greater detail. Because when you watch it, I definitely understand what she was saying on the side. I think Baldwin's reply was just so real, you know what I'm saying, as far as to my personal experience. And I definitely understood what she was saying, because I remember watching that conversation with my mother. My mother was like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it definitely hit still years later.
Right.
Because I've been in that place. Because what you were saying, my first therapy session, I'll never forget. You're right. It didn't take me long. Like the moment she said go, I was like, boom. Dr. Monique Walker, who's my therapist, and she told me she gave me permission to shout her out.
Shout her out.
She's a Black woman. And you're right, man. That cultural context is important. That cultural connection is important, because she's a Black woman. She identifies with so many things, and I don't have to over-explain so many things just to get to a point. And therapy is expensive. You can't go past that hour. So you need to be able to get to the point of conversations. But the first time I was able to have a session, to say my story out loud, Tariq, boy, it did a number on me. When I was done, I had to go take a walk, because I had never done that before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because usually you worried about time, if you get in someone's nerves, a text message going on. There's always in life like an interruption.
Right.
And the thing about when you're in a therapy session, there's no interruption. And for me to be able to say my story clean, brother, I got to tell you, as I was walking, I was done. And I realized I had lived what Baldwin has talked about. I had been performing. Now, I thought I wasn't. But I definitely perform as soon as I step outside, because I'm a runner. Just off the top, I go run in the morning. There's a white woman ahead of me. I can't run behind her. I got to go all the way across the street, run really, really fast around her, go across the street, all that, and that's in my day-to-day. That is my fault. We talking about 6 a.m, I'm performing. Then, depending on what kind of job I got to go to, I'm performing. And then if I come home to my lady, I got to, in a certain sense, perform, because in relationships, and there's a lot of men who share this, there's not a lot of time where I can necessarily lay that down, because you got stuff going on, I got stuff going on. But the perception with the Black male has always been, aren't you over that? And to friends that I have and myself, the experience has been, I allow you to dump everything on me, but there's a limit of how much I can dump on you. It's like a purchase package. It's like I can't. I gotta purchase every time, but eventually I'm expected to get over it.
Right.
What have you had suggested for individuals, Black males in particular, to kind of handle that, or couples in your experience?
One of the things I've had to talk to Black women about a lot is, you're coming to session saying, well, I want him to be more expressive. I want him to open up. I want him to share his feelings. Well, be very careful what you're asking for, because many times when they say that, they're thinking about feelings about them. They're not prepared for his feelings about the world around him and what he's experiencing every day. And so I tell them, look, if you want him to open up and he opens up and you shut him down, believe me, he's not going to open up again. So if you're going to open up that space and create a safe space, it has to be a safe space for everything, not just what you're thinking, what you want to know about his thoughts about you. He's not expressive. He doesn't tell me, what he thinks about me. Okay, that's going to be one part of it. But what about when he comes home and he talks about how, all the microaggressions he has to deal with at work every day? Or, something that happened to him when he went to a coffee shop that day. And he starts expressing all these negative emotions he's experiencing throughout the day. Yeah, and now he's being expressive in a way that you said you wanted it, but can you handle that? And so you have to be prepared for that. You have to be prepared to sit down and listen, not expect him to just get over it, not expect him to just bottle it up or file it away. No, you have to be open to allowing him to express whatever comes out of his mouth. The joys, the bitterness, every emotion that is out there, we're experiencing them. We just have to feel safe to be able to state them. And so even working with couples, one of the things you have to do on the ground floor is talk about creating that safe space. What is a safe space? You said you've gone through a couples therapy before too. What did that look like for you? Was there an explanation about creating safe spaces for one another?
Yo, so I'll be honest. I had 2, right? Because I'm a troubled man, Marvin Gaye's generation. I'm a grandchild of that.
Oh man,
2, right? And what I've noticed is that definitely the last one, there was like an agenda. Like, I need you to go in here because I want you to tell him how right I am.
Mm,
So
mm,
I
mm,
definitely felt,
mm.
and here's the thing, because I had already had been to therapy, I at this point, fortunately for me, it wasn't my first experience.
Okay.
So when I went in there, I felt it. I was like, yo, you trying to prove points. You know what I mean? Because versus the
Mm-hmm.
first one was more like open and okay, I went there by myself first, then then with the lady I was with at the time. But the second one was like, yo, I need you to tell him how effed up he is. I'm gonna sit back. Here's my money. Boom. Shoot. You know what I'm saying?
Stop
Like that's what it
playing. Yo,
was.
stop playing.
I can't make this up, you know. And listen, I got empathy. I get it in a certain extent because when you are frustrated and you just need validation, so my heart still understands that. But be that as
Mm-hmm.
it may, that's not what therapy is supposed to be about. You're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
everybody's supposed to be coming with their truth. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're coming and you're so committed that you can't move off your commitment, we're gonna have issues, which we did.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But what's happening is when you get into therapy or at home, a safe space should look like compassion. You know, compassion is being able to care for somebody without judging them. One of the biggest things I think we were kind of pointing out earlier is that when we're expressing ourselves, we don't want to be judged. We want just to be able to hear us and then validate. Validating means to have a sense of empathy, to be able to show understanding from their perspective, what their experience is and how their feelings are attached to those experiences. No, not saying that you have to have experienced the same. Oh,
I'm here. My phone
nice
just died. Go
ceiling.
ahead.
Okay. Not that you had the same exact experiences, but that you've had those feelings. You've experienced those same feelings in some other context before. So identifying with those feelings and validating those feelings based off of their perspective and off of their experience. And so by creating that safe space, you're just creating a place for understanding and compassion. Me being able to understand what you're going through and how you're viewing your experiences and how you're experiencing your experiences, as well as not judging those experiences and not judging the feelings attached to those experiences. That's what a safe space is. And so the moment you sit down and you start making faces at somebody as they're explaining to you what's going on, they're going to feel judged and they're not going to want to open up anymore. It's no longer a safe space. Once judgment enters the room, there's no longer a safe space. And so can you actually sit down with your mate and listen to them and hold what they're saying and hold their feelings without judging them? If you can't do that, you're not creating a safe space. You're not going to create a safe space. So you want to be able to validate their experiences, show that you understand without judging them. It's just that simple. But a lot of people struggle. A lot of people struggle because they can't get past their own sense of judgment.
I want to remind everybody, I got one more question I want to pull to you, Tariq, and I want everybody to get their questions. If you have the questions for this conversation, we've covered a lot. Get your questions loaded up right now because after I ask Tariq this, I'm going to go into the questions, okay? So whatever questions you have, please, please, please go ahead and type them out right now. Tariq, in my article also, too, who can I run to search for black male vulnerability, I have pointed out that there was a Hopkins University Press study about treatment disparities amongst African-American men in depression.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a stat, and it said, quote, women are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression compared with men.
Mm-hmm.
Many in the U.S. are up to 4 times more likely to commit suicide. Traditional masculinity norms contribute to men's underutilization of healthcare services. Men are encouraged to tough out illness for as long as possible, unquote. How you feel
Mm-hmm.
about that when you hear that as a licensed therapist yourself?
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering about that because the way I understand it, I need to go back and look at the research, I guess. I thought men suffer from depression more than women did.
Well, that's what they were saying. They said
That,
women do, but I guess men aren't being diagnosed
okay,
as
yeah,
often.
exactly, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Because again, like I said before, we're not going into therapy unless we're introduced to it through another method. You know, people have actually entered therapy from our discussions at the barbershop. People have entered therapy from, again, like I said, doing couples work. People have entered therapy by going through group therapy sessions. That's the way oftentimes we're introduced to it, but we're not going on our own. And we don't, a lot of us have that white coat syndrome. where we're kind of scared of doctors anyway, because we don't have that trust with them, with the American medical system. But on top of that, we just don't seek out help at all. Whether it's for physical conditions, we wait till it's too late, or we're breaking all the way down, and we definitely don't seek it out for mental. So yeah, we're not being diagnosed at the rates as women are, because yeah, women are going to therapy a lot more often than black men are. But once you get them in there, it's amazing not just how much depression, but how much anxiety exists in black men. When we start thinking about all the coping we see black men doing through smoking marijuana, drinking, having random sex, the violence, whatever negative stereotypes are associated with black male behavior, a lot of that behavior is fed by anxiety. We don't even realize how anxious we really are and how long we suffered from it. Again, if you haven't had the opportunity to really express what's going on with you and you're keeping all that stuff inside, you're going to feel some kind of anxiety. And more than likely, you're going to suffer from depression too. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to figure out how can I let some of this stuff go. But from years and years, again, going back through the generations of the oppression, of the violence that we've suffered in this country, there was a study done, I think back in 2013, of the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And they found that, I can't remember what the DNA code specifically is, but because of the experience of the Holocaust survivors, the DNA had been changed, and now their grandchildren suffered from an increase in depression and anxiety because of the experiences of the Holocaust. Now, that was one event, a major, horrible event, but still, that was one event that changed the DNA of their grandchildren, and to the point where they were suffering from mental health illnesses as well. Now, let's take it back again to the continent. Imagine just one person. Imagine being taken from your village as you watch your village burn. And you're seeing your family and you see your friends being killed. You're being pulled from that. You're experiencing that trauma right there. Now here you are, taken to the coast, hundreds of miles from anything you've ever known before, around a bunch of people speaking different languages, all crying out for their families just like you are. Now you're being put on these ships, in the bowels of these ships. You're not seeing daylight. You're shaking back and forth for months on end, not getting fed, people dying next to you, the trauma of that. Then you get to the Americas. You're put on a stage and you're sold into chattel slavery. You get the trauma of that. You get to a plantation. You're beaten, you're whooped, you are neglected, you are harassed, you're watching people around you have the same thing happening. Constant traumatization. Now we're just talking about one person go through all those traumas just to get to the plantation. You try to reestablish having a family. Your family's taken from you, sold away from you. The trauma of that. That's one person. Now extrapolate that over hundreds of thousands and even millions of people in the Americas over 300 years, almost 400 years. Generation after generation after generation. All that trauma for 5, 6, 7, 8 generations. Then you go through segregation. Then you have another 4 or 5 generations until you get to present day, where we are right now. And all that trauma. Now, if the DNA was changed after one major event for one group of people, imagine how that looks after generations and generations of that happening. So if you start wondering why we have so many anxious and depressed people and why we gravitate to so many negative coping mechanisms, it's because we've been experiencing trauma that's traveled in our DNA for centuries. For centuries. That's what you're fighting against. And so when we start talking about addiction, we start talking about mental health issues that we see in our community that have been undiagnosed and that have not been dealt with, is because of generations and generations of trauma. That's what you're trying to overcome. You're not going to be able to do that on your own. You need to get help. And part of that help is learning how to be vulnerable so that you're not locking everything inside. You're giving yourself a chance to express all those things that no one else in your line, all the way back to the continent, has been able to express. You're letting that out. That's what this is about. That's what this therapy and learning to be vulnerable is really about. Allowing yourself the space to overcome centuries of trauma.
I like that you brought it to America because that was how I wanted to pin it. Because one of the difference between the Black American experience versus slavery that was in Britain, slavery that was in the West Indies, slavery that was existed amongst, through the Middle Passage everywhere else is that we had Jim Crow laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Maybe besides, I would say like South Africa that had apartheid, but we had Jim Crow laws, meaning in America, there was always a reminder of our slave system, like
Mm-hmm.
actual laws that were put into place versus, you got treated in a certain type of way, but we talking about actual laws that affect us. So for those who may be listening to this and may say, well, slavery was so many years ago, Jim Crow was not. You understand? Like Jim Crow himself was not. I mean, it was just in, I want to say Tennessee, where technically there were some representatives or Congress individuals that voted. They didn't want to vote against slavery because technically within the fine print of Tennessee, you could technically still have slaves, even now, right? And so there were some congressmen who didn't vote against it because they were just trying to put it nipped in the bud. Like, okay, of course there's not no slavery. Let's go ahead and vote against it anyway. And you still had congressmen who was like, nah, I ain't gonna do it. In 2021, you understand? Like, this is in real time.
That's
like
crazy.
And so when I think about that, it leads me to what Il Americano has said, quote, a safe space for everyone, yes. And what I want to ask you, Tariq, is there a way that you can actually feel like safe in being a Black American to actually have that? Because is that honestly like a possibility, honestly? Because I gotta be honest with you, even in therapy or in certain conversations I had with friends, the idea of complete safe, I might have degrees of safe, but the idea of complete safehood, I don't know.
Take the degrees. Take whatever degrees you can find. You may not find a place where you feel completely safe. That may be beyond your comprehension at this point. But take the degrees. Wherever you can find the safety to express yourself, take it. It may not be to, the degree that someone else may feel it. But whatever you have, whatever opportunity you get, make sure you use that. Because you have to find a way to express what's going on with you. Again, doing couples therapy, we talk a lot about intimacy, and beyond just the sexual side and just the physical side, I do a lot of work around emotional intimacy. And I say there are 3 V's to emotional intimacy. Value, meaning you value the person that you're in a relationship with and how they feel and what their experiences are. Validation, meaning having the ability to understand and demonstrate understanding to your mate. And vulnerability, being able to express what's going on with you so that your mate does understand you. If you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable, or if you're not finding the space to be vulnerable, then you're not connecting fully with your mate. So you have to find a way to express those emotions. The only way your mate can ever fully understand what's going on with you is if you let them know. And the more you express, the closer they're going to feel. Why? Because they feel trusted. In order to have a safe space, you have to trust the people to let things out. And once you begin demonstrating that trust, it pulls you closer. They feel trusted, so they're going to want to be closer to you. And because you're trusting, you're going to want to be closer to them. But just imagine, if you don't have that safe space, if you can't be vulnerable, you're always going to have that wedge in between you and your mate. And so you have to find a way to connect through those emotions. And there's no way around it. There's no way around it, because it is really about understanding. You can talk all day about what's going on with you and what your experience was and what your thoughts and your opinions were. But unless you can actually explain how those things impacted you, no one could fully understand what's going on with you.
I got a question I'm taking from the live from Honey Dove. It says, hello, Honey Dove. How much of domestic violence between males and their partners stems from males being traumatized in their lifetime and not having safe spaces to be able to release and work through those experiences?
I would take it in a different direction and say that a lot of that domestic violence is around poor emotional regulation. And the poor emotional regulation is actually related to this. And that if you don't know how to express yourself, or if you haven't had the space to express yourself, you don't know how to properly, express the different negative emotions you're feeling. And so again, it's going to all come out as anger. And so domestic violence is so much deeper than that. Domestic violence is really about control. It's not just about emotional expression or emotional regulation, but some of the behaviors you see is related to not having proper emotional regulation, not being able to express specific emotions you're experiencing. So it all comes out in frustration and anger. And that's where a lot of the striking out happens. Now, if you learn how to better modulate your emotions so that they're appropriate for what's going on and not treating every situation with the same kind of intensity, well, you're not going to explode in the same way. You're not going to lash out in the same way. You're going to find the proper term to use to still get across what you're experiencing so people understand you and you don't feel the need to, use your hands and to express yourself. But again, domestic violence is more about control than just, poor emotional regulation.
Yeah, that leads me to also, I like to quote Baldwin a lot. Baldwin talks a lot about how the time when his father went mad. And there's a time
Mm-hmm.
as a black man in America, like you go mad, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the question that Honey Dove posed about men being traumatized, because unfortunately, there's a good chance that if you're black in America, you grew up in the inner city, you have seen domestic violence play out. You have seen it, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
within your own home or you've seen it. And then when you deal with the frustration that you and I have just been talking about just in our everyday lives, one of the things that I noticed within my own therapy journey was I had explosions, like verbal explosions.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? Because I walked around with this calm, medium measure like all the time. And what would
Right.
happen is when it would come out like from a distance, like anger. And
Yeah.
so it would come out, and fortunately for me, I didn't put my hands on someone, but I noticed that when somebody else would put their hands on someone, you're right, it would be control, and it would also be an explosion. Then after that explosion, after they kind of got away with it, it started to be control. Because when you think
Mm-hmm.
about the black male existence in America, it's not a lot of power you don't inherit any power.
Mm-hmm.
In America, it's always about power. And so if they
Right.
can find power on the smallest thing, whether it's from the corner block or abusing their woman or abusing their mate or partner, it's like
Mm-hmm.
they'll take it. Because there's
Right.
not a lot of power or control that you don't have. Because what you just broke down when it came to the middle passage of slavery, you are stripped down of that control.
Yep.
You might have been the king where we took you from, but you are stripped down of that. Jim Crow laws
Yep.
will remind you who you are, boy. And
Mm-hmm.
that language and that stuff still gets passed on to generations. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that trauma definitely exists. I got another question
Yeah.
from
But hold on, but
oh,
let me
go
just
ahead,
say
go
this
ahead,
real
go
quick.
ahead.
Let me just say this real quick too, because even though we've all experienced some kind of trauma, whether it was us directly or through our ancestry, um, not all black men are violent like that because a lot of black men are just disconnected. They're not going to be physically abusive. If anything, they're going to be more neglectful because they're not connecting, and they don't give enough effort to even try to do anything. So again, domestic violence people are in a whole category to themselves, but that is not reflective of all the people black men in particular, who experience trauma. Trauma may play a little bit of a role in that, but again, that's a certain kind of mentality versus people who deal with trauma who don't even connect with their emotions and don't try, to do anything to control anybody else because they're just retreating from other people.
Yeah, I was a retreater. I was definitely someone who would detach myself emotionally. And when you think
Mm-hmm.
about what you just said, that is true. Everything you
Yeah.
said, that is true. But America did a really good job of marketing the black male as if he is violent, as if he is just born angry, born to be someone who is going to cause harm on his family and others around without providing
Mm-hmm.
any kind of context, without taking any responsibility for what America has done to us, and
Like,
without breaking it down the way you have broken it down too. And so
mm-hmm. like,
outside people of our community view us like that, and some of us inside the community view us like that.
like you said, it's been marketing. America is a great marketer, and they marketed black men as, I mean, come on, man. Let's go back to Birth of a Nation. Let's go back to the minstrels. The way that they've marketed how, black culture and black behavior. A lot of us have, I don't want to say a lot. Some of us have adopted some of those behaviors because they believe that's how we're supposed to be. I remember working at a college and I would see black men that would come from suburban, upbringings who want to behave more quote unquote street or urban
Right.
because they believe that's how you're supposed to be. It's like, nah, that's not it. That's what America is selling you.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality of it. When I watch people, you know, who, again, working in college, you would see some black men with particular behavior, which was very stereotypical, that a lot of black men would model and emulate because they figure, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. And then you sit back and talk to the cats they were following and find out they're suffering from mental health issues. They're bipolar. They're suffering from anxiety. They're suffering from depression. They're suffering from PTSD. They look at somebody like DMX, you know, and how many people think, okay, this is what a black man is supposed to be. And then you find out, yo, he had some serious, not just mental health issues, but trauma in his life. And the reason why he portrays himself the way he does is related to that trauma. And you think that's the way you're supposed to act? No, 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 no. That does not explain who we are, not one bit.
No, that's real. Certified Tanisha says, what suggestions do you have for fathers on how to be vulnerable without undermining parental authority?
Honesty. It's honesty. You have to be able to be honest with yourself about what it is that you're experiencing and being able to, we just had a conversation about this earlier. It's okay to say when you're wrong. You know, you're not undermining your authority to talk to your children like, you know what, I was wrong about that, and to be able to apologize. If anything, that demonstrates for them what they should be doing as well. That's okay to be wrong. You know, if you're thinking that you're going to undermine your own authority by sharing, you know, your vulnerability, well, guess what? Your children are going to model that same behavior. You know, you want to create a space again for your children to learn how to be vulnerable and have a safe space to express themselves so they're not letting everything build up. I'm not saying to go out there and break down and cry in front of your children, but express the different things that you're feeling so that they know that it's okay to do the same thing. And they'll learn from you. They're not going to sit up there and disrespect you. That's not the way it plays. No, what they will do is learn, okay, there are different ways to express myself, so I'm not just yelling all the time.
Yo, that takes me when I talked about this in the article that I wrote when I had my first kind of stand off argument with my father as an adult, like a man-to-man argument, right? And I'm saying everything that I've been wanting to say. I mean, he just kind of took it in, and he was just like, yeah, you gotta stop being so sensitive about shit. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like, yo, you know what I mean? But that he was of that generation of like this right here, what you're doing right now. I don't understand all that. And when she talks about like how do you express the fathers, like you're right, because there are a lot of fathers that think that, especially black fathers, to be honest with you, think their presence is enough. Me being here is enough. I went out there to go work. I brought home. I provided. That's enough.
Right.
Because we see the statistics of like, oh, there's no black men in the home and families are broken up. And like you said, we believe it, period. We just take it in.
Right.
And so a lot of black fathers are walking around on some, well, I'm here. So
right.
That's enough. But they're not raising their boys. They're not even raising their girls. They're just there. You know what I'm saying? And then you can also have the conversation about those that are absent and those who are dysfunctional. But there are a lot of those that are sitting in the home that have been married for some decades, whatever, but they didn't raise their kids.
They weren't active.
Yeah.
They weren't active. Yeah. They were present, but they weren't active, you know? And what do you think that shows your kids? You know, because they're not seeing you be active with them. They're not seeing you be active with your spouse. And so they don't understand that there is supposed to be a certain level of connection between people, you know? And that's one of the reasons why I will say, man, I want to go so far back with stuff. One of the reasons why I think we have a lot of the relational issues in the black community right now is because we haven't seen healthy connections between our parents. You know, we see time and we relate everything to time. I can't tell you how many people come in and sit on my couch. I'm like, you know, I want to have relationships like my grandparents had. You know, they were together for 50 years. Well, was it a happy 50 years?
Right.
You know, what, you know, so you just want to spend time with somebody. You just want to do time. It's not about the connection you have. It's not about, you know, the romance, the passion, the understanding, you know, or even the love, the demonstration of love, not the affection, anything, but the intimacy. It's just about time. Yo, relationships aren't just about time. You know, I would rather be in a 10-year, super healthy, loving relationship than be with somebody for 50 years where there's no connection. You know, you have to worry about or figure out how you actually connect with people on a deeper level. And that gets back to my 3 V's. You gotta be vulnerable, you gotta validate, and you gotta have value in the relationship and the value in doing these things, you know? But a lot of parents don't show that. They don't demonstrate, especially in our community. They have never demonstrated that. So yeah, you can complain about single parents not being good models, but a lot of, 2-parent households aren't necessarily good models either. You have to figure out how to be vulnerable so your kids can see that as well. You have to model that behavior.
Hey man, I was a youth counselor for 10 years. And let me tell you, nobody wants to hear this, but I'll say it. Dealing with the single parents is a lot easier than dealing with the parents.
Tell me why.
Because dealing with the single parents, I was dealing with one individual. So whatever happened, I didn't have to worry about it. When I was dealing with parents, a lot of times they was not on the same page. The father would come up there and want to prove and overperform and everything, and have an issue with women and telling him what to do, meaning like the teachers and the counselors or whatever. So a lot of times I do counseling sessions just to be a male presence. A lot of times the mother would come up there and she'd be like, what, the father did what? Like they wasn't communicating with each other, although they lived in the same house.
Same house, right?
As a youth counselor, it was like, honestly, it was difficult to deal with. And I'm glad that you touched on, and we're going to get to the next question. I'm really glad that you touched on, a lot of people in our community do reference our grandparents. We hear that so much. We hear that in the Shape Up. I think I was with you when somebody was like, I want my grandparents been together 60 years and my grandma never complained. And you're sitting there like, well, you were only part of your grandma's 60. Number one, as a grandchild, and maybe only 20 years of that. And you're not taking into consideration, especially as a Black woman, how many rights and privileges that she may have had and access that she may have to get with the husband. My family is part of the Great Migration. My grandmother was 19 when she married my grandfather. You know what I mean? And she had a 6th grade education. Yeah. Did she love my grandfather? Yeah, she said she did. But let's be honest. How many opportunities did she have in some small town in South Carolina versus you have this man who's going to marry you and say, yo, we're going to move out. We're going to move and we're going to go somewhere else. Right. We're not taking those things into consideration. Like you said, we just talking about all these years, and then all you have is all these years. But where's the years? Where's the passion? And Tariq, as guys, we were a lot of times, if our uncles or our fathers didn't tell us directly, the messaging was always the girl that you're strongly sexually attracted to, that's the one you have fun with, but then you settle down with the practical one. And what I'm talking about, and then years later, now you're frustrated. But it wasn't your choice. It wasn't your first choice to begin with. Right. And we're repeating that all day long. And it's just like, I don't understand, why is that such a thing to repeat?
Because we don't know any better. We don't know any better, and they don't know any better. And they figure, let me do, it's almost like when it comes to that, it's almost like a business arrangement. You leave the passion behind to have what you think is the safest bet, and that leaves you feeling unfulfilled. So you have to find more than that. But again, it's an investment. It's an investment of your own emotions and understanding and desire that plays into that. But if you don't tap into that, even before you get into a relationship, you're always going to play it safe, because you're not looking for a true connection. You're looking for, what's going to be easy, what's going to give me the most peace. Not realizing that peace comes with different caveats. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'm not saying, you marry everybody, settle down with everybody that you have a passion for, because that's not healthy either. But there has to be something there beyond just the safety and the idea of time. You have to get past this whole time thing.
People want the traditional benefits without the traditional labor. They don't take in consideration of that at all. Jam Fitness says, what are some ways families can help break the generational curses and teach their children how to feel free and being vulnerable?
Come see me. Come on down. Come on down. Come sit on my couch. Let's sit down and talk. First of all, they have to decide to do it. They have to decide to figure out for themselves that they want something different. It takes one person to break that generational curse, but you have to decide to do it. You can't continue to just fall into the same pattern that you've seen before, because it's easy. It's easy to do that, but you will not be happy. You will not be fulfilled by doing that. And then your children probably may do the exact same thing. And that's how you end up getting these generational curses. But you have to make the decision to make a change. And so that starts sometimes with therapy. So you can figure out what's really going on. So you can see, what is your family of origin stories? That family that you came from. What are those experiences that you discover for yourself and through the different relationships in your families? One thing that we do in therapy is what's called a genogram, where we go back and kind of uncover your family history, not just your family tree and who's related to who, but what are those individual relationships like? What are your parents' relationships like with their siblings and their parents, and your grandparents, connections with their with their parents? You break it all down. Who in your family has had mental health issues? Or addiction issues. Just seeing what all the different family patterns are, because you know what? That makes up who you are. And so if you want to get out of some of those family patterns, you have to figure out what they are first, so you know what direction to move in. But it all starts with you making the decision to do it.
Yeah. And if you can't necessarily get to Tariq when it comes to therapy, of course, I always suggest for everybody to go online. There are avenues and ways that you can go where it won't hit your pocket so hard. Because I definitely, have done that or whatever. But if you can't do that, then I definitely suggest, some healthier tools to try to do. Because a lot of times, what you were saying too earlier, and I meant to kind of reply to that, a lot of us are coping with things in an unhealthy way. Where I got a godson where, I'm on him about that because, he's young and he wants to cope with things and the smoke weed drink thing, you know what I'm saying? Whatever.
Yeah.
And that's different from people who are cool with weed culture. When you're doing something to cope in an unhealthy manner because you just don't want to deal, that can lead to problems later on down the line that you're not prepared for. And then to your point, Tariq, now you're forced to come see you, right? But it might not be at that point. A lot of people also too feel as if they want therapy to be like that quick antidote. And I know you probably had experienced that, right?
Man, look, I tell people that from Jump Street. This is not gonna be fast. Actually, somebody called about, coming to see me earlier, and like, how long does it take? I'm like, it takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as you need it. It's not a quick fix. I can't say that after, 5 sessions, you're gonna be good to go and, take over the world. Nah. I got people I've literally been seeing over 70 sessions. It takes the time that it takes. And I can say it's gonna take you forever.
It took me 3 years to have my first breakthrough, yo. Like 3 years to have my first breakthrough. And I'm not saying that breakthrough was a lot, but it took 3 years to get that first, like, oh, wow, we're here. 3 years.
Yeah. It takes time. You can't be in a hurry, but that's the problem. This is why people need to, there's 2 things I want to say. Well, before I get to this, one, in terms of, you need to find better coping mechanisms, more healthy coping mechanisms. But coping doesn't mean dealing with the problem. Coping means finding a way to be distracted from the problem. You still have to deal with the problem. So even if you find a better coping mechanism than burying yourself under, 10 pounds of marijuana or 15 bottles of alcohol, you still have to deal with the issues. So you can't get away from that. The issues still have to find some kind of resolution so you're not continuing to feel whatever it is you're feeling. Coping isn't enough. Coping is a stopgap, but it's not going to stop the issues from continuing to eat away at you. I knew something I did. I was gonna forget my other thought. Something about therapy. Oh yeah, but by the time people typically get to see me or see the therapist, they're in so much pain. All they want is for the pain to stop. It's like having an open bullet wound, and now you're in emergency care. All you want to do is take away the pain. But unlike a bullet wound, which is instant, this stuff has built up over years. And so you want me to fix 25, 30 years of issues in 2 or 3 sessions? That's not the way it works. It's going to take a little bit of time to dig through what's actually happened with you so that I can even figure out what medicine, what therapeutic medicine to give you to help move you away from the pain. With couples, they come in here, and before I can actually get to doing work with them, and maybe 6, 7, 8 sessions, just so they can get all the stuff out first, because there's so much discomfort, so much pain. You just want to vent and get everything out. Okay, you got it out now. You feel better? You feel like you're in a place where you can actually do some work? Let's get down to business. But If you're waiting till things get so bad that you're in so much distress that you just want to instantly gone, you waited too long. And it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that fast. It takes time. It took time to get into it. It's going to take time to get out of it.
El Americano got a question. He says, what would you recommend a man do when the safe space has been violated, but he still has the need to be heard? How should he express himself in an unsafe space, or should he even bother?
You have to communicate with that person why the safe isn't safe. If this is someone who genuinely cares about you and wants the best for you, but maybe they're just not aware of how to keep the space open and safe, you have to talk to them about it. You have to be transparent about how the way they're communicating with you is affecting you, and so don't give up on it. You still have to find a place to be able to express yourself. If they've proven over and over again that they can't keep a safe space for you, then you're probably with the wrong person. You don't need to be around them, because again, it's about demonstrating care. That's one thing I open up with a lot of my sessions with. How did you demonstrate care for your mate this week? And part of that could just simply be listening, simply validating, but if you're not keeping that safe space open, then your mate isn't, you're probably with the wrong person, but just communicate with them. Look, this is what I need from you. I need you to just listen. I don't need you to do anything about what's going on. I just need a listening ear. I just need some understanding. I just need some compassion. That's all you have to do. But if they can't do it, you might have to move on to the next one.
Yeah, you also need to express what your safe spaces are, because maybe that person that you're with doesn't know that you're going to this place for a safe space. Maybe they don't know that you take late night drives to kind of chill out for a second, So communication is a factor in that too. But I've been in that situation. I know exactly what El Americano was talking about, because I've been in that situation where somebody came in my safe space and was like, no, I want to talk about this now, and disrupted everything. And to what you said earlier, as a black man, when I rarely show my feelings, and now that I have shown my vulnerability, I'm like, F it. I don't want to talk about it no more.
Right.
I don't even want to deal with the situation no more. I'm out the door. When the situation probably could have just been, I just needed a breather.
Right.
But we don't have enough conversation about safe spaces. But also, if you do find that, communicate with your partner. Like, look, when I go out, I'm not going to no bar. I need this. Like, communicate with them. So I'm not saying that it's right for them to violate your safe space. I'm not saying that at all. But a lot of men do things that they're coping with as an exercise, and they're not telling their partner. They tell their man at the bar, or they tell everybody at the barbershop. They're not telling their partner, like, this is what I like to do when I'm going through this.
But even when you're going to the bar or when you're going out with your boys, are those really safe spaces, or are those just other coping mechanisms? Because when we talk, exactly, because if we're talking about safe spaces, we're talking about spaces where you can actually express what's going on with you and be vulnerable and let some little things out. But oftentimes when you go into these places, it's not to do that. It's to just get away. It's to find a moment of peace so that you can just, separate yourself from everything else that you're dealing with. That's coping. And again, that's not actually dealing with the problem. So the safe spaces are, with your mates, are with, loved ones, are with your therapist, and sometimes it may be with your friends as well. But, it has to be explicitly stated that this is what I need. Not even, you don't have to say safe space. I just need you to understand where I'm coming from. I just need you to listen. And that's it. I just don't want to be judged. That's the biggest thing. People don't want to be judged. You don't want to be judged. So why would you judge somebody else? Just listen. Just listen. Listen with compassion and empathy. That's all you got to do. Got to practice.
I don't want to always have the Tupac F you attitude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can do it. I can do it. I want you to know I can do it, because that's the easy. But for me, me personally, that'd be easy for me. It's easy for me to emotionally disconnect. It's easy for me to look at you as a throwaway individual. Now, that's just too easy for me. I want to challenge myself to be better, but I need that space. I really do need that space, man. This has been just the most great conversation, and we can never, ever have enough time when we get into places.
I know. I knew it was gonna be like that. I know it was gonna be between me and you. I know it's gonna be like that.
Especially when we like at the shape up, even when we at the barbershop. It's like right when it starts to get real, it's time to go. But I guess that's what life is. Tariq, can you let everybody know how they can get to you first?
Yep. You can go to my website, insightsmft.com. That's Insight Marriage and Family Therapist. You can find all my information there on how to contact me, or you can find me on psychologytoday.com. Not just for me, but that's where you can go to find any therapist anywhere around the country. It's a great resource, a great tool to find any kind of therapy that you're looking for. Psychology Today, but you'll also find me on there. And you can also check out my podcast that I do with another black male licensed marriage and family therapist, because there's only a few of us in the state of Maryland to begin with. My man, Dr. John Hart. We have the podcast Kings of the Heart. You can find that on kingsoftheheart.com, and hopefully coming soon to every streaming device as well.
Yeah, I also like to note, too, that there's going to be another Shape Up April 8th. It'll be you and the Cosby, my man Cosby.
Yeah, that's right.
April
Yeah.
8th, right here on IG Live. I like to point that out.
El Boogie.
Yeah, my man Cosby. Big ups to Charlotte Anderson, the founder and director who put all this together. You know, Queen Charlotte is just our heart. We appreciate her for us.
That's right, Miss Anderson.
Yeah, for
so
platform. So April 8th, you and the Cosby. Yep. Also, myself, I'm Jay Hard. You can always check the link in my bio. My social media handles are Jay Hard Society. Writer for AURN, American Urban Radio Networks, which is a Black-owned digital media company that you can check me out for. You can also check me out, Hip Hop Matrix Show with my brother DJ Academics. Also here, starting with today, when I'll be with my man Tariq, and hopefully when the world open back up and we all vaccinated, we'll be back in the actual shop also too.
Yeah, man, I need that. Yeah, man, I need that.
Right. Tariq, can you leave us with just anything that you can kind of just suggest from this conversation, any final thoughts or anything that you want to say before we go?
Mm-hmm. Again, being vulnerable isn't about being weak. Being vulnerable is about being transparent with your emotions and just letting people understand you better. You know, the more you can articulate what you're feeling, find the specific words, not just being dependent on your actions, not just being dependent on expressing anger, but being able to say, look it, I'm frustrated. Look it, I'm disappointed. Look it, I'm confused. I'm guilty, whatever. Finding a way to be more targeted in how you're feeling, being much more specific, will lead to better understanding and less contentious arguments.
I like to just say two things. Shout out to my Black therapist, Dr. Monique Walker, because she's been a tremendous help in my healing. So I like to shout her out with that. And I had to leave because I'm a comic book geek. I was a huge Transformers fan. And there was a quote in the Transformer movie back in the day from the Autobot Springer that said, "I got better things to do tonight than die." And that's it.
Sure enough.
Thank you for joining Starting With Today. We appreciate you. Make sure you can check this out. Tell everyone about this conversation. You can rewatch this right here on our platform, IG Live, and our YouTube channel, and everything else. Much love, respect, be blessed, be successful, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jay Hall. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Peace, y'all.
Thank you, my brother.